All right. Okay. So to get started, we are going over the core subjects EC-6 ELAR review, and this is part 2 of the review. So I already did a video and recording a review that went over the first 5 competencies. I am going over the information that's going to be found on the core subjects 391 exam. So remember that there's 2 different exams. There's the 291, which is the old one. They're phasing that one out. And then the 391 is the new one that is going to be the EC-6 moving forward. So on the old one, on the 291, if you need to pass that one, some of the competencies that are on that exam, I'm not going over just because they're going to be found on the STR reviews. So when we start those ones. So I'm just going over competencies 6 through 10 in today's session. So just to get started with competency 006, this is looking at the importance of inquiry and research skills to students' academic success and instruction that promotes students' acquisition and effective use of these skills in the content areas. So just to clarify where I'm getting this information, you would go to that website. I know I've sent it to some of you. So it's the tx.nesync website, and that's where you can find the information for each of the exams. So you would click on exams, and then you would find this one. So like I mentioned, right, the 291 is the old exam and the 391 is a new one. So if you have never taken the EC-6 exam before, you will be taking the 391, okay? So when I click on that exam, I'm gonna scroll down to where it has the preparation materials. There we go. And then I'm going to look at the overview and exam framework. And this is how you would prepare for any of your exams. So we have some resources that you can use. So there's 240 tutoring, there's certified teacher. And then when you look at these competencies, it's going to give you the description of all these descriptors. And these are the things that you need to research or know more of. Okay, so when I looked at, for example, today's, when we're looking at competency 006, right, it's telling us that these are all the things that a teacher has to be able to know how to do. So based on what it says here, this is where I looked up information that correlated to this. So for example, one of the things here, it says know the grade level expectations, right, for the TEKS. So literally it's like going in there and looking at the TEKS, and we're going to take a look at that as well, okay? But it really describes everything that you need to find or that you need to know how to do for the exam. Okay, so with this exam, you have to understand how students are going to be transitioning in reading. So children from pre-K to 2nd grade they refer to it as a stage of learning to read, right? Which makes sense because they're still trying to figure out, how the sounds kind of blend together and how they form the words. And so at this stage, from pre-K all the way to 2nd grade, in the classroom, when you're reading is done purely for pleasure, right? So the stories are interesting and they're supposed to be high quality text. So I'm not going to be reading like a textbook, right? In pre-K to 2nd grade, I'm looking for stuff that's interesting because I want to get my students involved and excited to read. So it's got to be something that's going to grab their attention. After 2nd grade, students are transitioning to this stage of reading to learn, okay? Because at that point, students should be fluent readers. And so now you can look at different types of text and they can actually read to collect knowledge, right? So at this point, that's where you might have like, what's it called? Like they're actually looking up research, right? So looking at information that's not necessarily like, super interesting, right? But it's not fantasy, right? It's stuff to just gather knowledge so that they can organize that. And if you need me to slow down, just let me know, okay? All right, so when it comes to text structure, you need to teach your students how to view all of the text features. So text features would be anything like if you're looking at an article or a book, right? You're gonna have things that are big or bold. You may have diagrams. when you're reading text, right, you may have like those bolded words, right? So if they're like definitions or something, there may be tables, charts. So you need to explicitly teach your students how to read all of these features. So I know that that's something that teachers do, is they'll say, okay, before we read, right, we're gonna go through and we're gonna look at all of the text features. So what do you see? You know, we have a title, let's read the title. You know, there's a picture, what is this picture about? So kind of helping students to get an idea of what they're gonna read, right, by paying attention to those text features before they actually read. And so for some students, they may totally glance over them, right? They don't see the point to them. For others, that's all they may look at. So you just want to make sure that you're, you know, teaching your students, this is something that we need to do, but then we still got to read the article, right? Okay, so then in terms of patterns of text, you'll need to, there's different ways that text can be organized. So you have to like point those things out to the students. And you'll have to read text that shows all of these different types of patterns. So for example, some books or texts are going to have chronological order, right? So things are going to go in order from start to end. And then there's going to be some texts that are used to compare and contrast, right? Maybe I've seen some where it's like, you know, looking at opposites, right? So this is big and this is small, and you know, this is I don't know, just opposites, right? Can't think of another term right now. Then looking at order of importance. And then there's going to be sequential. So sequential means that it is used to explain a process, or it's giving directions on like how to do something. Then there's cause and effect. So those are looking at relationships between events. And so it's and with these types of texts for the littles, it's literally like they're telling you what the cause is, and they're specifically telling you what the effect is. So it's not anything where they have to be guessing, you know, it's very explicitly stated in the text. And then of course, there's going to be some that's going to provide problems as well as solutions. So these are a lot of different types of text. And so I know when I think of like kids books, for me, I just think of like stories, like, you know, fairy tales, but I don't really think of how all of these different patterns of text can be found in the different books. So that may be something that you take a look at as well, just to kind of take a look at what those books might look like. So efficient readers, they have very good decoding skills and strong comprehension skills, but they can be taught to be even more efficient by scanning and skimming the information before they actually start. So I'm, you know, similar to, I'm sure what you all do, right? When it comes to looking at a text or a book, you kind of flip through and look at those, you know, text features first. So that's something that we want to teach our students to do. Because efficient readers, you know, the ones that are able to, you know, decode the words very, very quickly and are able to comprehend, right, understand very easily, this will actually help them do it even faster. And that's kind of like what our purpose is. So it's not about reading faster, right? It's working at comprehending, right? Comprehension. So making sure that they're doing that faster. So when it comes to study skills, for the research portion, right, when it comes to this comprehension, this competency, they have to be taught how to study information, and graphic organizers are a way that can help them organize that information. So I kind of just put a couple here. But when it comes to having students research or having them write, it's best if you have them if you provide them something to organize their thoughts, right? Organize the information, because if we do it the way we do it, right, where we may just like jot down notes, students at this age level, they do not know how to do that yet. So we have to teach them those skills. So for example, we've got a Venn diagram there. There's a circle map that can be used for story mapping. And they just kind of have a thinking map here, looking at freedom. And then this one is looking at main idea with supporting details. So some sort of graphic organizer is always something that you're going to use to start that writing process with your students. So that way they're not just writing with no purpose, right? This is going to help for them to visualize the information that they have and to see it organized nice and neat. So graphic organizers, there's a whole, bunch. I know those of you that are in the schools, I'm sure you've seen a lot of them, but again, what it's just doing is providing that visual representation of the information as well as students' ideas. And by doing this, we're also teaching students that skill of, organizing your information. So with the students in the lower grades, right, it's making it more concrete for them. But then as they get older, we've already kind of taught them that skill of putting that information together. So it's kind of like making those processes in their head clearer so that they're able to carry that skill on later on. And then it's also going to help them to look at relationships between information, right? So we're not just writing all the information down in like one section, but we're really looking at how the information can be grouped together in chunks. And then note-taking. So note-taking, I would think, I know when I started teaching high school, I thought my students knew how to take notes. I figured that was something they should have learned by then. But even in the high school, students are not very good note takers. So think about, when we're working with kids in elementary, right, we're looking at fourth graders that can write. We have to explicitly teach them how to take notes and how to summarize that relevant information. So we can't assume that the students know how to do it. And so a lot of the information and the competencies for the ELAR TExES, it's about explicit instruction. So teaching your students very, explicitly, this is how we do it. Not having students guess, what it is that they have to do, but really telling them this is how you do it, because you are the expert in the classroom. So we need to also give students a purpose for note taking. So, letting them know that it's so that they can understand the content better. And it's really challenging for students to figure out what's relevant. So, some things that I've seen teachers do is they'll highlight, like the important information. Maybe as they're going through it, they'll underline what students need to write down. So you need to help them figure out what is important. And then again, the way we make sure that our students know what's important is by stating that objective. So we always start out with our lesson frame. And in some schools, they also have like literally like an objective, like for the whole unit. So we have to let students know, what the purpose of it is. So that way, when they're taking notes, they have that purpose in mind. If not, then they have no way of identifying what's important and what's not. And I think all of this sounds very common sense, right? But when it comes to the little ones, we have to be very, very purposeful in everything that we're doing, because we're teaching them, right? They're barely getting into the education game. Okay, so when it comes to research, and this was one that I think I needed some more information. So this might be something that you have to look into a little bit more. But with research, you need to help students with developing a researchable question. And you also have to provide them with that graphic organizer, right? So whenever we're having our students write, there's got to be some sort of graphic organizer. We're going to take a look right now at the TEKS, so you can see how research is going to be a little bit different as they go from fourth grade to sixth grade. But you're first going to have to provide them with a question, and then it's kind of like gradually teaching them how to develop their own researchable question as they go higher up in the grades. And then you want to ask students to highlight any keywords. So like in their question, they would develop a researchable question and then ask them to highlight keywords. And then using those keywords, that's what they can use to like find more information, right? So let's say we're having them go online and look up information. Well, students they'll probably type in the whole question, right? But if we have them highlight those keywords, then they'll be able to just look up information on those keywords. And then you can place them in groups to brainstorm other keywords, right? Because some students will have a bigger, academic vocabulary or more background knowledge. And then you want to make sure that you ask them to list sources. So something that was mentioned in the competencies was knowing the difference between primary and secondary sources, as well as teaching your students how to cite them. So if you don't know how to do that, make sure you look that up. And then you also want to teach students to skim the articles to fill in the graphic organizer with information. So we're not going to have them, go online and research, every single article out there and read every single one, but it's more about teaching them to, use those text features, skim through, see if see what information they can use for their graphic organizer, and see what information maybe the article's not going to work for them.
Host, one thing I tell my kids all the time is like also about what's a credible site, because they go to Wikipedia for everything. And it's like, don't believe everything you read off of Wikipedia, because anyone can change that,
Yes, very good. Yes, so thank you for bringing that up, Diana. So yes, it's also about, when it comes to research, it's also about making sure that they find credible sources. So very good. So I didn't even think to add that. Because you're right, students don't know, right? If they go on the internet and I don't know, you find a commercial or something that comes up on Google, right? It's not even a valid source. They're gonna believe it and they're gonna write it down. So you're right. We have to make sure that we help them to understand what can be used and what can't. Okay, so some strategies that you can use to help your students with their writing as well as with research would be a think aloud. And so with a think aloud, and this is a strategy that can really be used with a lot of things, not just English and writing, but with this, you model the thinking, like as you're doing it, you're modeling exactly what you're thinking in your head. And then you would pause, like while you're reading a text, you would pause, and at points where you think the students will have confusion, maybe if it's a confusing word, or maybe if something surprising happened in the story. So you would actually pause on purpose, and then you would explain to the students like what it is that you're thinking. Maybe you stop reading and you kind of have that dialogue, that inner dialogue that's going on. And what it does is it's going to help students to do that themselves. So we always want to make sure that we're giving them the purpose, right, for why we're using the think aloud strategy. So, maybe you would provide them with some guiding questions. So as we're reading this book, these are some things that we're going to be looking for. Maybe if it's like informational text about like an animal, right? Remember, we wanted to know, where the animal lives and if there's any predators, that may come after the animal. And then as you're reading, right, you might stop and say, hey, remember we asked this question about, if it had predators, and I just read that, these are some predators for this animal. So kind of letting them know like why we're reading, right? And then talking them through what that looks like. So students, right, if all we do is just read and read and read, and we never stop, then students think that's what we do. But good readers are going to stop and reflect, and they read for a purpose. So we need to make sure we're modeling those best practices with them. And then, so when we do a think aloud, the teacher is going to do it, model it, and then you're going to give students the opportunity to do it, and then the teacher is going to give them feedback. So what the teacher can also do is say, when the students are practicing, it's like, okay, go ahead and read this next page. And then the teacher will stop the class. All right, everyone. So I want you to go ahead and stop. And now let's go ahead and think aloud. So the students can start practicing that strategy, but the teacher will actually stop them at given points. So that way they're not just reading and, never stopping, or they're stopping at points that don't quite make sense. Okay, so I've got a video here that shows what this talks a little bit more about think aloud.
I like to teach comprehension strategies by using think alouds. Think alouds are when the teacher reads a text and draws attention to things that are going on in my mind. And things that I like to focus on are before reading strategies. So I have them posted in the classroom. So I have 2 posters that are focusing on before reading strategies. I have during reading strategies, and I have after reading strategies. And I'll introduce a text like this, which was one that we looked at the beginning of the year from our biography unit. And it's the story about Iqbal Masih, who is a child laborer from Pakistan. I'll ask the children, what's the purpose of reading the text? The purpose of reading the text is that it's part of our biography unit. What can you think about when we know that this is a biography? Well, it's going to probably be in chronological order, and something really important probably happened to this person, or this person did something really important, and that's why there's a biography about them. So the text form helps us, the purpose helps us. Text features are really important, and I'm really surprised sometimes that kids don't pay attention to them, so I try really as much as I can to draw their attention to it. So the title itself, The Story of Iqbal Masih, you know, it's going to be his story. It's going to be his life story. And there are aspects of text and important features that are really going to help you understand what's going on in the story, so pay attention to them. It's also a good strategy to pull up previous knowledge. So is there another story that we've covered? Is there something that you know about child labor around the world that's really going to help you understand this story? A couple of the strategies that I focus on for during reading are to summarize what you've learned so far. I also like to talk to the kids about things that aren't answered in the text yet that they might be wondering about. And in order to ensure that they're understanding, get them to retell, or I retell, or summarize what's gone on. And if I don't understand what's gone on, or something's a little bit confusing, they have to go back and reread it, because that's a really good strategy for understanding. If they come across a word that they don't know, it's something that they can't just go past it, they have to try some strategies. So one of the strategies that I encourage them to use is to see if the word has a root. If it has a root and they know what the root means, think about a prefix or a suffix and how does that affect the meaning of the root. Think about the context, maybe that can help you. If not, go to the dictionary, figure it out. Another during reading strategy is to evaluate and ask questions about the story. And finally, when you get to the end of the story, it's really important to get the child to reflect upon what they have learned from the story. So to summarize it in their own words, and then I know that they've understood the story, and I can articulate, when I do a think aloud, I can articulate all of these for them so they see it modeled. And that's very helpful for the students.
Okay, so that was how she does it in her classroom. So notice how she had the posters. She says she actually has posters up in her room to help remind students like what it is that they should be doing during the Think Aloud strategy. And so obviously, right, in the lower grades, you know, the kids aren't going to be able to read everything, right? But it's always good to have that text present so, you know, students can see it in, you know, in real life. And then in the higher grades, they will be actually able to read it so that they can, you know, recall what it is that they should be doing as they're reading. Okay, so another strategy that can be used is called the Sq4r strategy. And then this is used for text in content. So what I mean by content is like, you know, science text or math text, you know, social studies, right? Like when you're reading like an actual, you know, I guess like a textbook, right? So this is actually a strategy that you can do as adults, right? And so we're going to see a little video that kind of explains it a little further in detail. But you would first start by surveying. So you would teach students to survey all of those text structures and make predictions, as well as generate questions. So what do I think this story is going to be about? What do I think may be happening in this story based on what I see? Then students will develop questions so that they have a purpose for reading. So, you know, like, let's say if I'm reading my speech to print book, right? I have a specific reason for reading it, right? Maybe I'm looking for, you know, strategies to incorporate, you know, phonics or something. So I'm going to have a specific strategy for reading. And the reason, right, is because when you're reading, if there's no purpose, you may read and read and read and don't remember anything, right? It's like, what? I blanked, right? So you want to have students practice this so that way they can read with that purpose so that they remember. Then you're going to have students read while they look for answers to their questions, right? So they're reading for that purpose. Then you'll actually have students write. So they'll summarize the information that they read, and then they're actually going to recite it. So they'll either kind of summarize what they read in words, like orally, or they may answer their questions orally. And then the last one would be review. So they'll go back and they'll look at the text. So based on their answers that they came up with, they're going to go back and look through the text to see if the answers were actually correct. So it's just kind of, you know, checking their work. Okay, so the Sq4R, this one is more looking at what this would look like for adults, but the same strategy applies, okay?
So, how you doing? How's the semester going for you so far? I hope you've gotten off to a smooth start and that you're regularly attending all of your lectures and completing your assigned readings. Now, speaking of readings, I know that sometimes keeping up can be challenging. Has this ever happened to you? You are physically reading your book, turning the pages, or scrolling through them online, and you get to the end of your chapter and you're like, I have no idea what I just read. And then you have to go back and start all over again. This happens because simply reading on its own can be what's called a passive strategy, where we're not really doing anything with the information. So our brain doesn't really try to remember what we've just read. In order to make information stick, we need to make reading more active, and you can do this by trying one of my favorite reading strategies called Sq4r. I'll walk you through it. S stands for survey or scan. So before you start reading, do a quick scan of the chapter to find out things like how many pages does it have, are there pictures, diagrams, study questions at the end. This scan gives you an overall picture of what you can expect. Q is for question, which is really the key to the strategy. So before you start reading, write down some questions that pertain to the chapter. So you can typically find questions at the beginning or end of each section, or even better, you can use your weekly learning outcomes from your course outline as questions. So I recommend writing down each question on a separate flashcard or separate piece of notebook paper. R, the first R is for read. So now you start reading, but as you're reading, you're like a detective specifically searching for the answers to your questions. The next R is for record. So when you read and find your answers, you pause and you record or write them down on the back of each of the corresponding flashcards as you find them. The third R is for recite. Once you've recorded all your answers, recite them out loud, as this helps your brain to remember. And the fourth and final R is for review. Once you've completed your flashcards, you'll want to review them as often as possible to help the information stay in your long-term memory. So there it is, an awesome reading strategy that you can try today to help you read and remember all the content you learn tomorrow. Remember to connect with one of our friendly learning strategists if you need some support improving your reading skills. Happy studying!
Okay, so with the littles, I don't know if Diana, do you or Amelia, have you seen them do the Sq4R strategies in your classroom?
I don't usually walk into the classroom when they're doing their reading strategies, but I have seen them do like make a few of them. Like when it comes to writing the questions, like what is it that you want to know, or what is it that you think? Stuff like that I have seen.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
honestly, this year obviously is quite different, right, with all that stuff. But yes, last year I definitely did see a maybe not exactly, you know, this intense, but most definitely teachers do kind of follow similar strategies.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So again, this was a video that was more for you know, adults, right? So she has the index card. So like for the littles, you may just have them, you know, write down like 1 or 2 questions, and maybe they're just going to write it like on a graphic organizer or a paper or something. And then in this example, she had them write the answers on the back, right? But that might be something that you could do maybe for like your 6th graders. That might be something that would work with them. But in the lower grades, you obviously are going to have, you know, less questions that the students are looking for. Okay, so another strategy that can be used is called reciprocal teaching. And with this one, it is used to help struggling readers engage in a dialogue about the text. So it's meant to elicit this information from the students. So what you would do is, as you were reading, the teacher's actually going to be asking questions to the students to really see if they're actually comprehending what they just read. So these are the main things that the teacher will be looking for. So they're going to be at some point asking the students to summarize, you know, something that they read. They're going to be asking, you know, specific questions about main idea, clarifying anything that's difficult. So if, you know, maybe there's a word that the students may not have understood, or maybe something that was, you know, maybe quite didn't make sense, you know, if you were like reading it literally or something, as well as making predictions. And so with this strategy, the teacher should have, questions pre-planned, but it's not going to be something that is, like where you're like very explicitly like reading off of a paper, right? But it's something that you'll have to do like beforehand to make sure that you have those questions ready to ask your students. And so with reciprocal teaching, it's going to be done with small groups. So when you have those like struggling students together, this is what you would be working with them. Not necessarily struggling students together, but when you're doing small groups, this is what you would be looking at.
Okay, could I have group 1 please come up to the table?
At Frank Love Elementary School, reading expert Shira Lubliner shows off a technique called reciprocal teaching that's designed to improve reading comprehension.
Tap, 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 tap. A sea otter lies on her back in the water.
The goal of reciprocal teaching is to prepare students to run their own discussion, taking turns as leaders. But first, Ms. Lubliner shows them how to guide a conversation about a book.
See, my first job is to ask a question. And I'm going to try and ask an important main idea question that starts with a question word. Let's see. What does the sea otter do to prepare lunch?
There is no replacement for a teacher who can generate a good discussion and get kids to really ponder what they've read and the whys and wherefores and connect those meanings to their own lives.
Well, I'm going to predict that we're going to learn some more about what sea otters eat.
Now it's time for the kids to lead their own discussion, with a little help from Ms. Lubliner.
Is this a sign of danger?
The kids begin with the first of 4 clear steps, asking a question.
What do sea otters have to be careful of?
The next step is clarifying the meaning of unfamiliar words.
Prefer. It means like somebody likes something better than they like something else. Afloat. Jesse. Afloat means a little bit above the water, and they're floating on the water, not just under it or over it.
The next phase of reciprocal teaching is summarizing, finding the main idea.
Sea otters have a lot of enemies, so they have to be careful of eagles, sharks, and fishermen.
The final step is prediction.
I predict that we're going to learn more about otters in this story.
Reciprocal teaching promotes a give and take between teachers and students that achieves the ultimate purpose of reading, finding the meaning.
Okay, so I thought that was a good example explaining how that works. So in there, they showed how like the teacher directed it first, right? The teacher was the one asking the questions to model what that looks like. And then it was the students that were actually asking each other. But, with the, let's see, like with the group of students, it's best if the teacher is there, right? To make sure that the, questions and answers and all that are aligned. So you're still gonna have to be there, but it's a strategy that can be student directed as well. All right, so then the next one is DRTA, which is directed reading and thinking activity. And so with this one, students are going to sample the text to develop a background. And what we mean by that is really just kind of skimming, right, those text features. So looking at the title, pictures, maybe reading a couple lines from the book. So they're just, and that can be with a book or an article or whatnot. Then students are going to make predictions based on what they have skimmed, or what they've sampled. And then they're going to confirm or correct their prediction. So they're actually going to read. And then when they're, done reading, then it's like, okay, so was your prediction right? Was your prediction wrong? So again, with this one, it's reading for a purpose, right? That's kind of the main idea for all of these strategies is it's giving students a purpose for reading. So that way they're able to comprehend the information that they're looking at. And it's not just a reading to read.
directed reading and thinking activity helps transitional, intermediate, and advanced readers think actively and become personally engaged in reading. It also serves to help students learn to read silently by supporting them intellectually throughout the text. The video is one in a series of early literacy instructional videos produced by the Virginia Department of Education, the PALS office at the University of Virginia's Curry School of Education, and Prince William County Public Schools. When preparing for a DRTA, the teacher selects and reads the text. Then episodic breaks in the plot line are chosen as stopping points. In introducing the text, the teacher activates students' background knowledge. She then guides students through 3 recurring steps: predict, read, prove. Reading material for the DRTA should be at the student's instructional level. They should not have previously read the text, and they should not read past stopping points. If students finish reading the section ahead of time, they can record evidence for or against their original predictions. Let's watch Mrs. King Vinson as she and her students demonstrate the DRTA. They are reading Chapter 2 of Tug of War, an African tale retold by Julie Ellis and illustrated by Meredith Thomas. Mrs. King Vinson begins with review of yesterday's Chapter 1 reading. She then asks students to predict what is going to happen in Chapter 2. Let's listen as students share their written predictions.
Let's share. What did we say? What did you think? What do you think is going to happen?
I think he's going to hurt them all.
Okay. What do you think?
I think Tortoise is going to trick that tree.
Okay. He's going to trick them. What do you think?
I think Tortoise and the hippo are going to do the same trick.
Okay. And what do you think, Jacob?
I think Tortoise was going to plan. That was mean.
Okay. That he might make a plan. That's mean. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is read to find out, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to read Chapter 2. What you're going to do, you're going to have your book, and you're going to read Chapter 2 and stop at your blue bookmark. But there's a couple of things I want you to do while you're reading. I want you to find proof or evidence for or against your prediction, for or against what you think. After you're finished reading, I want you to mark in this book whether it was true, whether this came true, what you said or not, and what page you can find it on. And when you're ready, I'm going to give you a yellow piece of paper, and you're going to put that right on the sentence that is your proof or your evidence.
While students whisper read, Mrs. King Vinson assesses their reading and monitors their written predictions. Once reading is completed and written predictions are made, Mrs. King Vinson moves to step 3, prove. Let's watch as Jacob shares his proof.
All right, and Jacob, what did you think? Did your prediction come true?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Where's your proof or your evidence? What was your original prediction? What did you say?
I think Tortoise was going to make a plan that was mean.
Okay, and show us the page that you found that it does say that in the sentence.
You've just seen an instructional video demonstrating the directed reading and thinking activity. DRTA is a very effective summarizing activity. For more information on these and other early literacy activities, please visit the PALS website at pals.virginia.edu.
Okay. So I like that strategy, but notice how she had it marked, like where it was that they were going to be having those stopping points. So that is something that if you are doing, you're going to have to pre-plan, right? So as I mentioned, it's going to be within certain parts in the story. So trying to, again, keep them reading like for that purpose. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with like a book that has chapters in it. It could just be, with a regular story, but you just stop it at those key points within the story. And with that strategy, what it's also having students do at an early age is look for text evidence. And that's something that, you're going to need all the way up into college, right, is being able to find that textual evidence. Okay, so the next one is vocabulary. And so when it comes to vocabulary, you need to make sure that you are teaching the vocabulary through direct, concrete experiences. And I think in the first review video, we kind of looked a little bit more at what that looks like. But when it comes to vocabulary, you can't just explain a definition, a word by just using a definition, because it's words and more words, right? And so if the student doesn't understand this word, what if they don't understand these words? It's not going to make any sense to the students. So remember, when they're small, we're still building that vocabulary for them. And so with the younger ages, we always have to be more concrete instead of abstract. So when it comes to vocabulary, you want to teach it by giving them an actual example and context. And then you want to actually have them like use it in the correct context so that they can remember it. But something that's literally like tangible, that they can see or that they can feel. In the last review, when we were talking about vocabulary, there was a video where the lady was talking about the word sigh. And so she had students going sigh, like literally, very, very big and embellished, so that the students understood like what that word meant. So when it comes to vocabulary for your content area, you want to make sure that you introduce that technical vocabulary before you actually read. So if you're going to be reading a book and there's, maybe it's just like an informational text, if there's going to be a lot of words that are really challenging for the students, don't do it as you're reading or do it after you're reading, but literally before they do it, you're going to explicitly teach those vocabulary words. And again, something very concrete for students to actually see. None of this guessing, what do you think? Let's look up the definition in the dictionary and let's copy it down. No, we want to really give them examples, real life examples of what those terms actually mean. So pictures, if you have like the actual physical, object or something, will help with that. And so if you introduce that vocabulary ahead of time, that's going to be helpful for all your kids, but especially helpful for your ELLs, because we're really, they actually have less of that vocabulary than our, English speaking students. And what it's going to do is it's going to help them with that reading comprehension, right? So if they don't understand a lot of the words, and when they're reading, they're not getting anything out of it. But if we can, fill them with that information that they need for the vocabulary ahead of time, then going in there, we're already off to a good start. Okay, so in that competency, so like I said over here, it mentions knowing the TExES and looking at expectations for inquiry and for research skills. So on the next slide, you're going to be able to click on the link so that you can actually go to the TExES, and it's going to give you a vertical alignment document. And we're going to be looking specifically for inquiry and research skills. Okay, what is it that my students have to do? And this is looking specifically from 4th to 6th grade. Okay, so inquiry and research skills. Okay, so you should be able to click on this document. And we're going to be referring back to it almost with every competency. So if you want to copy and paste that link into like another browser window or something, because I know sometimes it'll close once I go to the next page. Okay, so I got this tool from the TExES resource system. And so in the TExES resource system, you can find vertical alignment documents. Basically for all of these competencies, it was anything that says you have to know. So like, I'm gonna go back over here. So anything that's talking about like knowing about the TExES in relation to something with, writing or reading, it's going to be for 4th through 6th grade. Like that's pretty much what all of them are referring to. Because once students get to 4th grade, they have enough reading comprehension knowledge and writing ability to be able to be doing, more difficult tasks. So you'll have to know what that looks like. So for this next one here, right, we're going to be looking for information. Oops, sorry, wrong slide here. There we go. We're going to be looking for expectations that are related to inquiry and research skills. Okay, so inquiry and research. So when I scroll down here, if you'll notice at the top, it's going to give me, a little bit of what that student expectation is. So this one's looking at phonological awareness and print. but we're looking for inquiry and research skills. Okay, so inquiry and research sounds like students will probably be having to read and write for that. And so the way I kind of did it was I just kind of looked down in the 4th grade and I was just looking for anything related to inquiry and research. So let's see, still not seeing much. So you'll literally see like those terms in there. Right, so we're still going through. There's text evidence. So like text evidence might be related to a little bit to research.
There is one in grade 4 that says and make adjustments such as rereading, using background knowledge, asking questions, and annotating when understanding breakdowns. I think that's related to.
Oh my gosh, I'm joking here. I'm sorry, which one did you say, Amelia?
I'm sorry, I was muted. It's 4.6, grade 4, 4.6I.
All right, so this one right here.
Let me see, because I have it on.
Okay, monitor comprehension, make adjustments.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's inquiry. Sorry, looking at research. Oh my gosh, I'm like dying here. So what you'll notice here is you can look at the difference from 4th grade all the way to 6th grade. Like as to what it is that the students are going to have to do, like in terms of like increasing complexity. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So there's one, and then there is one in here that's specific. It specifically says research. Did anybody find that one yet? I know it was lower down. Composition. There we go. Okay, so we've got so these different types of text. Okay, so here's a research plan one, right? We mentioned that one. So students in 4th grade, they'll develop and follow a research plan with adult assistance, right? So the teacher's going to have to really guide them along that process. In 5th grade, they're doing that again with assistance. And then in 6th grade, there's not any assistance. So they're actually going to have to develop it and revise their plan. Okay, so it's going to go a little bit more challenging. Here we're looking at identifying and gathering relevant information from a variety of sources, right? And that's the same across the grade levels. In 4th grade, they're just identifying primary and secondary sources. In 5th grade, they're understanding the credibility of them. And then in 6th grade, they're differentiating between them. So it's just a little bit more complex as they go through. So here we're looking at recognizing the difference between paraphrasing and plagiarism. Then here they actually have to differentiate and they're doing the same in 6th grade. Okay, so all of that is just kind of related to the research and inquiry. So just, you know, I suggest that, or we're going to go through them today again. It's just kind of looking at how they gradually progress. Okay, so before we do that one, I know Amelia and Diana and maybe even Luz, you may have some other strategies that you've seen in the classroom where teachers are reading with some sort of purpose. Or do you have anything that you might be able to share with us?
Well, I can share like for our children, the pre-K 3 and 4,
Yeah.
you know, probably they're not called, we don't call them these strategies, but teachers do read and read for purpose and for comprehension. Of course, the children are a little bit a lot younger than the fourth grade or fifth, but you know they do read. They do have stopping points and questions, thinking out loud, asking questions, so to check for understanding. There's also a point during the story where the children get an opportunity to draw something related to the story, and then be able to kind of verbalize, verbalize what part of the story it is, or what's going on in their drawing. And then during the week, reviewing, going back, and again, checking for that comprehension of the reading.
Thank you.
I have seen one for 5th grade where the teacher, after they read, she pairs them up, and then they have to do, each of the kids have to come up with 3 questions about the reading that they did. And then they have to create their questions, and then they ask it to the partner, and then the partner, they take turns answering all the questions that they come up with when they were reading it. And if the partner doesn't know, the other one explain it was when we read about this and all that, so they can discuss more about the reading.
It's interesting because Ms. Hinojosa, part of the reading for comprehension, we have what we call turn and talk, and they don't form the question, the teacher does, and then they turn and talk to a partner, the shoulder partner, and about the specific question, and then share out again what each of them said, or what they were sharing about the particular question that the teacher asked related to the reading.
Thank you.
I've seen like in 4th grade, like a teacher used like quick writes. So she'd have them like, get their journal and write it 1 sentence, like your prediction. And then, after finishing the reading, then they would summarize what they read in, quick 3-4 sentences. And then they could also draw a picture.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So some other ideas there that can be used with the students. All right, so what I'd like for you to do is to go ahead and read through the descriptors. So in other words, on this page, so if you don't have it, let me drop it in the chat. Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and read through these, read through these descriptors, and you're gonna go ahead and make a note of any terms that you need to learn, or any descriptors that you still need to research. So I obviously can't go over all of the material, right? But I kind of gave us a good starting point in terms of like what it is that we're looking for. So I noticed that a lot of these SEs for the ELAR is asking for instructional strategies. Okay, so like I mentioned, when it comes to reading, Reading Rockets, that it's a website that you can go to. It has a lot of information, and it's all research based in terms of instructional strategies that can be used with the students. So when it comes to reading, right, which is what this is about, Reading Rockets is going to be a really good resource to look at strategies. So when you are looking for anything in here, like, if you're looking for more strategies for something else here that's specific, just make sure that whatever you find online, you are, it's either coming from like an education, entity, or it's something that is actually research based. Okay, so I know there's a lot of teachers and people that can go online and make articles and videos, right, on YouTube, and searching for some of these things. I found a ton of stuff, but you want to make sure that it's coming from a credible source, because some things that teachers may be doing in the classroom may not necessarily be research based. Okay, and that's what we want to make sure that we are doing. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of minutes so that you can go through and look through those descriptors. And then I'm going to go ahead and set you up into some breakout rooms so that you can go ahead and share some questions that you might have about this section. Okay, so I'll give you about 2-3 minutes to go through there and then 5 minutes in your breakout room. So with the student expectations for the TEKS, I did, like I said, I got these from the TEKS resource system. So the link, let me see, I'll drop it in the chat. That way you all can have it saved also. So I would probably bookmark this one just so you can kind of take a look at them. So looking at the ELAR competencies, they're really only looking for you to know the 4th through 6th grade specifics, I guess. So just kind of looking at what those expectations are as the kids get older. And of course, it doesn't hurt to take a look at the lower grades. You can actually click up here and you can see that progression from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade. If you want to see, you know, how that's gradually progressing or scaffolding up to get to students to this stage here. So again, in 4th grade, students are going to be writing more and they're going to be reading stuff that's not just for fun, right? Not just stories that are interesting for the kids. Of course, it should still be interesting, but you get what I mean. Okay, so now let's take a quiz. Let's see. So these are a couple of questions. So I'll go ahead and let you take that. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go on to competency 7. So competency 7 is going to be dealing with writing, so specifically writing. So the teacher understands the conventions of writing in English and provides instruction that helps students develop proficiency in applying writing conventions. So some things to consider, and this is something that's going to tie into the STR exam, but we want to remember that for students to do well with written communication, they also have to understand oral language. And so students should first be taught the components of oral language, which include phonological and phonemic awareness. And again, this is all tied to STR, but it matters in this competency. So any children that are lacking those skills in phonological or phonemic awareness are going to have difficulty with spelling as well as with reading, okay, because it's all tied in together. And so phonological awareness is going to refer to the ability to recognize and manipulate spoken parts of words and sentences. And phonemic awareness refers to the ability to notice, think about, and work with individual sounds or phonemes in spoken language. Okay, so when we're talking about phonics and all of that, right, there's a little bit more to it. But if our students are not getting that good foundation in phonological and phonemic awareness, like in the lower grades, then they're going to have difficulty making that connection from the oral language to like written text, right? So when it comes to reading is not a natural process. It's something that actually is, you know, it has to be learned. It's not something that's going to be innate or like built into you. In the last review, we kind of talked about how oral language or spoken language is something that they, you know, research kind of believes is something that we're born with, right? We're born to be able to produce and to understand. But when it comes to reading, that's not, right? And so reading is going to be tied with the writing. So there's going to be those issues. So when we're looking at language comprehension and word recognition, Scarborough's reading rope is something that's going to be really important to understand. And again, this is going to tie in with STR, but again, it's important here. There's, you know, this research out there, and basically Scarborough said that there's all these different components that are going to be part of students being able to be skilled readers, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes into play. It's not just understanding that letters make sounds, right? So students are going to have some sort of background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, you know, language structures, that verbal reasoning literacy knowledge, all of that to understand the language. And then in order to actually make sense of the words, right, they have to know phonological awareness, decoding skills, as well as spelling and sight recognition. So all of these together, if your students have all of this, I guess, base knowledge, then they'll be able to be skilled readers, which in turn is going to help them to be good writers and spellers. Okay, so it's all interconnected. Okay, so when we look at the different phases that students can be in, the first phase in terms of dealing with alphabets and knowledge is going to be the pre-alphabetic phase. And so in the pre-alphabetic phase, it's also going to be referred to as the logographic pre-reading or pre-alphabetic phase. And at this point, children have not acquired the alphabetic principle, which is the idea that letters represent sounds. Okay, so students at this age, they don't get that, right? They just think that they just know language, so they know spoken sounds, but they don't understand that the letters that we see, you know, on papers, on the stores, that those are actually going to be corresponding to something that we say. And so their version of writing is maybe using letters that they know along with symbols and maybe even numbers. So you may even have students that, you know, or kids, I guess, right, that are, they're saying, you know, when they're little, oh, look, I'm writing you a note, and it's just kind of like scribble, right? So they get that, you know, that there's going to be some like writing involved, but they don't kind of get how all of that is put together. So in this, you know, this is kind of an example of what that looks like. So this, you know, in this case, the kid just kind of wrote some random letters that they knew, right? But it's not really making much sense. Okay, so then the next one we have is going to be the early alphabetic phase. And at this phase, children are learning that letters correspond to sounds and spoken words. So they're starting to make that connection. But when they write, they may eliminate the vowels, or they may just use like the first letter, like the first sound of a word to represent like the whole word, or vice versa. When they're pretending to read, if they, you know, I don't know, if they see a word that starts with a letter T, they're just going to guess at what the word is. So they're not looking at all the rest of the letters and trying to sound it out or anything. It's more like just guessing, right? So they're kind of on the path to reading, but they're still not quite getting all of that. And, you know, they don't have it all yet. And so at this age or at this phase, they're beginning to demonstrate that understanding of phonemes. And so phonemes, again, is going to be the sounds that make up words. Okay, so if I have the word, you know, letter, right? There's l, e, t, right? So there's like 4 phonemes in that one. But students are starting to grasp it, but again, they're not there. And so here, this is an example of how a student might write in this early alphabetic phrase. So this is what the student should have written. I have a blue hat. And so you can see how they kind of have some of those sounds in there, but it's not, you know, they don't have all the vowels. A lot of times that's what's kind of missing also are those vowels. So and the later alphabetic phase, children are going to be learning to spell phonetically, and they're going to begin to sound out unknown words as well as try to spell unknown words phonetically. So they're getting how those two are connected, and they're going to start to build a memory of words that are commonly seen. So just like we mentioned in the last review, how there's going to be sight words, and the sight words are going to start to grow, right? So like for us, we've got a ton of sight words. There's stuff that we don't have to sound out because we've been exposed to them so many times. We already know what they say. So for your students, when they're getting into this later alphabetic phase, they're already starting to build that bank of sight words so that they're going to be able to read faster. And so at this stage, they're beginning to build their orthographic knowledge, which is the specific spelling patterns in the spelling system. So knowing that, you know, like you could have, like in the word lock, you've got a CK at the end. So they're starting to understand how, you know, you may have that like CK at the end, but maybe not necessarily that you can't have a CK at the beginning of a word, right? So it's kind of looking at those little things there. So they're starting to build those ideas, but it's not fully developed yet. And then the last phase would be the consolidated phase. And so At this point, they have a very rapid recognition of a substantial amount of sight words, right? We're already in that, obviously in that consolidated phase. And that's because they already have that orthographic mapping, which means that they're able to, really quickly transition between the phonological processing system and the orthographic processing system. So they're able to figure out what words mean really quickly. And so they can be exposed to words, like for a short amount of time and understand them, versus in the earlier phases, they've got to be exposed to them repeated amounts of times in order for them to understand what the meanings of the words are. Okay, so those are kind of the phases of like, understanding the alphabet and letters and all that. But then when it comes to spelling, there's going to be some different stages there as well. So when it comes to having students spell, these are going to be the stages of spelling. So there's scribbling, there's going to be pseudo letters, there's phonetic, there's transitional, and there's conventional. So notice how all of these, they kind of tie in to those phases of where they're at with learning the alphabet system, right? Or learning that, oh my gosh, can't think of the term. But understanding that correspondence with letters and sounds, okay? So these are the different stages, which are pretty, I think, self-explanatory. So scribbling, literally like just kind of, nonsense stuff that they're writing. Pseudo letters would be like, I don't know, a triangle or a circle representing some sort of letter, like, kind of like symbols. They're not actual letters. Then a phonetic would be where they're actually spelling using the sounds, but they may be missing some of those important things in there. Then there's that transitional spelling where they're starting to, add more of the phonemes that are part of the words. And then conventional spelling would be where we want our students to be, as they get older. Okay, so this is a real quick overview of this again.
Oh, he's just scribbling.
Just? Did you say just? Scribbling is a crucial precursor to developing writing skills. Let's take a look at the stages of writing development. It begins with scribbling, making random marks on a paper, sometimes small and light, other times boldly filling a page with color. Mock handwriting imitates cursive writing and appears as a wavy line. Children may use mock writing during dramatic play when, for example, they write a grocery list or take a food order at the classroom cafe. These letter-like shapes are children's first attempts at making conventional alphabet letters. You may see them in drawings, perhaps as labels. Mock letters soon become more realistic, looking more like actual letters of the alphabet. Usually the first ones that appear are those in the child's name. The letters may be written across the page in a string, looking like a sentence, or, if repeated, may appear to be a paragraph. Children begin to cluster conventional letters so they appear to be words. The letters in the words are random and do not spell an actual word. Children use phonetic spelling as they attempt to spell words based on their awareness of letters and their sounds. Words are usually written using capital letters. In the early stage, a child may write only the beginning and final letter of a word. In later stages, a middle consonant or vowel appears. A child's first name is usually the first word spelled conventionally. Other words like mom, dad, dog, cat are also among the first conventionally spelled words. As children progress through the various stages of writing, the stages may overlap as they experiment with writing tools. A page of mostly scribbles may display mock handwriting. A page containing a majority of mock letters may also contain conventional letters.
Let's take a couple of minutes and look at ways adults can support children's writing through the various stages. Provide a variety of paper of all sizes, shapes, textures, and colors, and multiple writing tools, including pencils, pens, crayons, chalk, and markers in all classroom centers. Provide many opportunities for children to write.
Talk to children about their writing, but stop if they seem more interested in their writing than in talking about it to you. Serve as a model. Let children see you writing for a purpose as you make lists, create labels for classroom items, and jot down notes.
Have plenty of print materials in the classroom. Talk about print and how letters work together to make words. Point out how a group of letters makes a word, and that a space means the next group of letters is a new word.
Identify letters the child writes and make their sounds. Help children listen for sounds in words.
Read to children. When appropriate, without disrupting the story too often, point out words and their letters. Look, this says hop. H-O-P makes hop. Spell words for them when they ask you to. Accept all children's writing as important, from the earliest scribbles to conventional letters and words.
Okay, so those are the stages of writing. Okay, so when we look at where students are going to be in the actual, writing stages, there's going to be emerging writers, there's going to be early writers, and then there's going to be newly fluent writers. So if you'll notice, all these are kind of, they're all kind of tied together, right? So it's looking at things from a different lens and then looking at those stages. Okay, so emerging writers, these are going to be students that are able to dictate a story, and they're able to use those initial sounds in writing, right? So they're kind of in that, like, what is it called? Oh my gosh, I totally went blank. So they're able to understand that, like, the first sounds of words, right, are gonna be able to, like, kind of represent those words. So for emerging writers, they're typically going to be using pictures to communicate their messages. So for example, my son, right, he's in kindergarten right now. And this year and last year when he was like in pre-K, their version of writing was just drawing a picture. So last year he had a lot of pictures, but there really wasn't much writing. If anything, it was maybe like him copying something that I wrote. Excuse me. But this year in kindergarten, now they're actually having him write stuff, right? And so obviously his words, are not, phonetically spelled. They're not, they're not where we would, I don't know, think older kids would have to be, right? But he maybe will have like the first letters of the words, and he's starting to kind of build in those other consonant sounds that are in the words. But he's always going to have a picture. And so with the picture, they're going to be able to communicate their message. And so at this age and emerging writers, they're understanding that writing represents those spoken sounds. And so for implications, right, for the classroom, the way that I can support these emerging writers is that I can ask them to read what they've written. So again, if I'm looking at what my son writes, in his sentences, I'm kind of like, oh, I don't even know what that means, right? But he can read it to me because he understands like what he was trying to say, right? And if they're, pseudo letters, then maybe, like in the lower grades, like, so like when he was in pre-K, if we were having him write, it may not have made sense. I would have been able to understand anything. But if you ask them to read it to you, right, it's helping them to understand that connection between the print and the spoken language. You also want to try to provide them that conventional spelling if needed. So like, for example, my son, right, when he was writing something for school, if he had like a big word, like something that, he didn't know how to spell, like for example, sloth, right? So he had to talk about perezosos, right, which are sloths in his lectura for español. So he was like, how do I spell perezoso, right? Like, I don't know how to spell that. So I would spell it out for him. But anything else that he had to write, I would ask him to, write it the way he thought it should be written. So kind of getting your students to practice that. So you don't want to, you don't want to spell out every single thing for them at this age, right? Because they're trying to learn it as they're going. And then another thing you could do is actually ask students to dictate to you as you write on the board. So, okay, let's go ahead and let's come up with a sentence, for this example. So you tell me what to write and I'm going to write it on the board. And so the students, again, what we're doing with these emerging writers is trying to make that speech to text connection, right? So just trying to tell them that what I write actually means something. And then of course, like they mentioned in the video, you want to make sure that you're modeling the writing, right? So you're trying to have, and I'll see in elementary classrooms, a lot of like anchor charts or posters where the teachers have actually written the stuff out. So it's not necessarily like, you know, posters that are already printed, but literally the teacher's writing. So students are able to, again, just make that further connection. Okay, so the next stage would be your early writers. And so your early writers, they already understand that that written message remains the same, right? So it's not going to change. Whatever you write, it says one thing and it's not going to say anything else. And so for them, they're able to use a knowledge of sounds and letters to improve their spelling. So they're starting to spell phonetically, for example, and they incorporate feedback in revising and editing. So if if they write something and you as a teacher tell them, hey, you know what, this isn't quite spelled correctly, or you should use a CK here instead of just a K, they'll go ahead and they'll go back and they'll try to figure out or try to fix it. At this stage, they're also using conventional grammar, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. So obviously my son is not quite there yet, right? So he's still in that phase before this. And so implications for the classroom, you would guide the children to read and reread information. So they're not just going to read it once, but they're going to read it again, right? And again, so that they, again, are understanding that the message is going to stay the same, that it doesn't change, after we read it once. You want to try to ask students to break words into syllables so that they also are understanding, how words have those parts that are making them up. And yes, students, they're going to do syllables like in the lower grades, but at this point, when we're looking at words that we're writing, right, we're also trying to have them, again, go back and break those words down. So when it comes to spelling, right, they got to understand that I'm not just spelling a word, right, but I'm spelling a word that is made up of like these word parts or these syllables. And then you can also help students to separate words into common phrases. So there are going to be some things that they may say, like for example, when you're singing like the alphabet, right, like A, B, C, D, right, elemental P, right, when you say elemental P, students may think that elemental P is a word, right? Elemental P, because of the way we say it. So there are some things that in our language, or maybe in things that we read, like in the book, it mentioned once upon a time, right? We always say that in a book, once upon a time. So students may think that once upon a time is actually a word, but we have to help to make them understand that it's once upon a time, right? So trying to break down those things that are just common phrases that we hear all the time, so that they think they're just connected. And then you also want to make sure that you ask questions to guide the students to examine their writing and make their own corrections. So it's not about you going and telling them, oh, you need to fix this, you need to fix that, this is wrong, right? It's asking them, hey, when we write a sentence, what should we always start our sentence with? So a student can say a capital letter. Okay, well, do you see a capital letter there? Or when we finish a sentence, what should we have at the end? So that the students can go back and self-correct, okay? All right, and then we have our newly fluent writers. So for our newly fluent writers, they're gonna use pre-writing strategies for a specific purpose. So whenever we have our students write, there's always got to be some sort of pre-writing that they're going to do, right? We're not just going to have them go straight into, writing a paragraph. Like there's going to be a little bit of planning that's going to go into that. And so with your newly fluent writers, they're going to address topics or prompts clearly and independently. So if you give them a question to write about, they'll actually be able to write about it, right? And it's not going to be like, everywhere. And then they're going to be able to organize their writing logically and sequentially. So again, for the earlier stages, they're not quite there yet. But at this stage, they should be able to like write a story, in order. They should use conventional grammar, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. They should be able to revise and edit their work independently or collectively. So in the stage before this, right, they needed more guidance and more feedback. But at this stage, the students should be able to do that revising and editing on their own, right? It can be done in a bigger group as well, though. And they should be able to produce different genres of writing, right? So, there's like your persuasive, there's like your expository, there's like writing a letter, right? So they'll be able to produce all those different things. Whereas in the lower grades, it may not, they're not at that point yet because they haven't learned all of those different types of writing. And so implications for this stage, again, you want to make sure that you're using some sort of pre-writing activity. And what we mean by pre-writing activity is like, maybe you're going to have a thinking map where they're going to brainstorm, right? Maybe you're going to have them as a group, they're going to talk together and they're going to come up with questions, for their writing. So it's just something that they do beforehand so that they have something to kind of start with to write. So they have those clear guidelines. And then you want to make sure that you're providing interesting writing prompts. So if it's not interesting, the students are not going to have that buy-in and they're not going to, they're not really going to participate as much. So we want to make sure that we're always providing stuff that's interesting for the students and relevant when possible, like to the kids. You want to make sure you use peer editing as well as self-correcting. So, hey, let's go ahead and let's change papers with your partner, and let's see if we can, look for that, grammar, spelling, punctuation things. Okay, so for this one, in terms of writing, you have to make sure that you teach students the correct pencil grip. So like down in, pre-K kindergarten, you want to make sure that students are able to hold a pencil correctly, because if not, it may slow them down, right? If their hands cramp up or they get, if they're not, they start to hurt, so they're not able to write as long. So a correct pencil grip is really important. And for pencil grip, you want to try to work on those fine motor skills. So these fine motor skills can be started like in pre-K, but in kindergarten, for example, my son, right, they had them using clay. So we had to buy clay for him. And sometimes all it was just making balls, right? So it's just kind of using their little hands to kind of work out your fingers. Or they would have them, shape it somehow into something. And it's just working on those fine motor skills. So what you also want to do is practice having them create the letters. And so the first picture there is showing sand. So you can have them like write it in the sand. And so it's literally helping them to do the strokes, like to understand, the direction of like your finger, what it should be doing. Or they can have the students actually make the letters like out of clay. Okay, so again, it's just trying to help them understand what the formation of the letters looks like. But all of these, what they're also, mainly focusing on is just that those fine motor skills that the students are going to need. So if they don't have those fine motor skills, if their hands aren't, strong enough, right, then they're going to have issues with holding the pencil and being able to write. Oh, some other things that you want to do with the pencil grip or with teaching students how to write is working on just specific strokes, right? So, okay, we're just going to go ahead and draw lines, so we're not writing any specific letters, but let's just practice writing lines so that they're able to put those, and circles so that they're able to put them together to form the actual letters. And then when it comes to pencil grip, you explicitly need to teach students how to hold it. So I've seen videos, my son, like the first semester, they would play a video that literally showed the kids how to hold the pencil. And so it would tell them, you put your fingers a certain way, you put the pencil here, you flip the pencil over to the back, and that's how you should be holding the pencil. And then you also need to explicitly teach your students how to sit. So both feet need to be on the floor, the paper needs to be turned slightly to one side, your other hand is on the desk holding the paper, right? So very explicit instructions on how to do this so that the students are learning those best practices. And when it comes to writing, you need to make sure that you're like monitoring it, because if you're not, right, if you're doing it like in a big class and you're not looking at all of the kids, then they're going to start to pick up bad habits, like learn bad habits, and they're going to continue them, which is going to be harder to fix as they get along.
Miss Hinojosa, if I could share really quick, I
Yes.
actually carry these with me all the time. I hand them out like candy They're little like pencil grippers. I got them on Amazon. They make a world of a difference if you have.
I've seen them. I think I need to get one for my son because I know I was not good at monitoring him and he holds it wrong. So I can see his hand like cramping up, you know?
They really, really work. I swear, I think it's like $4.99 for like a pack of 12 or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and again, that's a great way to model, right, how the students should be holding that pencil. So that would be something that they use for a while, but after a while, it becomes like second nature as to how it is that they should be holding the pencil. Thanks for sharing, Diana. All right, so some instructional strategies to write with, to use for writing. You want to model effective writing. So again, you're the best writer in the classroom, right? So you want to make sure that you're modeling that. So you're writing regularly and the students are actually seeing it. You can provide students with sentence starters. So that would just be like the first, maybe like the first couple words to start a sentence and then it's a blank. So they're kind of like filling in the blank. So that'll help them to develop more complex sentences. You want to try to do punctuation exercises. And so that could be where, you read something to the students. So they maybe on their paper, they have all of the words, but there's no punctuation. So you read it to them and then they have to put the punctuation in so that it makes sense. Or you can also provide students with connectors and conjunctions for sentences, right? Because when you think of like the lower grades, students are going to be writing very simple sentences, but as they get older, right into 4th, 5th, 6th grade, we want to make sure that they're working on those compound sentences. So you're going to need to provide them with those connectors or conjunctions so that they can put their sentences together to make them a little bit more complex. Oops. Okay, so this is going over handwriting.
Hi, today we are going to discuss 5 essential practices to keep in mind when teaching handwriting. The first is that handwriting should be taught in small groups. This enables one to closely observe students while they are writing and to provide immediate feedback to correct errors as they occur. When students practice without supervision, they often form the letter incorrectly, which can lead to bad habits. Providing feedback after the work is completed is definitely not as effective. The next important principle regards focusing on lowercase letters. Uppercase letters can be harder to form. The majority use 2 or more strokes, which requires multiple pencil lifts and continual visual monitoring to ensure accuracy. Uppercase E, for example, uses 4 separate strokes, whereas lowercase e uses 1 continuous stroke, making it more efficient to form. When students are taught uppercase first, they tend to write in uppercase, which makes their writing hard to read. This is often a hard habit to break. Lowercase letters account for about 95% of all letters in reading and writing. It is therefore essential to teach students the letters they need the most and not to overwhelm them with learning both upper and lowercase simultaneously. Once students have mastered all their lowercase, only then should uppercase be introduced. The next practice, that of grouping letters by their common stroke, makes handwriting instruction very efficient. The Handwriting Heroes program sorts letters into 5 groups based on their first stroke. The letters in the skydiver group all start by skydiving down. The bouncers drop down, up, and over. All the cannon pops start like C. The skiers ski diagonally down. And the surfers surf the wave, meaning they have no common stroke. For the 4 groups that do share a common stroke, the repetition of the same movement from one letter to the next builds motor memory and promotes rhythmic writing. In addition to grouping letters by their first stroke, there are several other multisensory teaching strategies that enhance memory and learning. Handwriting Heroes provide visual models in the form of workbook illustrations. Digital animations that explain why the letters are formed the way that they are. Large wall cards which can be displayed in the classroom, and alphabet desk strips for easy reference. Tactile kinesthetic strategies use movement to teach the letter strokes before requiring students to put pencil to paper. Using whole arm movements, students write the letter in the air, first with one hand and then with both hands together. Students also love using touchscreens to trace, copy, and write the letter, and dry erase surfaces for making Play-Doh letters and for rainbow writing. For auditory learners, songs help to reinforce the common stroke among the group's letters, and stories incorporate the letter sounds.
T skydives down, then a toucan tosses a tomato.
Encouraging students to say the action words in the story while they are making the letter helps them to recall each stroke. All these strategies together decrease the need for visual guidance and lead to more automatic letter production, as demonstrated by the following video.
Drops down, bounces back up and over the haunted house. B drops down, bounces back up and around the ghost is. O drops down, bounces back up and onto the rabbit's head. N drops down, bounces back up and over to take a nap. M drops down, bounces once, then twice to catch that mice. P drops down into the tube, bounces back up and around the pink porky pig.
The last principle that is of great importance when implementing a handwriting program is to practice these skills daily. Plan for 5 short lessons per week over 5 weeks. Teach 1 new group per week and then review the letters already learned. Thereafter, students can continue to practice using a summary worksheet. Graph the time it takes to complete the worksheet to motivate students to improve their speed and build fluency. For more information on teaching handwriting and to download Handwriting Heroes materials, visit Teachers Pay Teachers and the App Store.
All right. So when it comes, it mentioned the songs, and I thought of, so my son had to learn how to write with his numbers, right? He was messing up with his numbers. And so in his clase de español, the teacher said, it's cuello, panza, y sombrero, and he was always doing his 5s wrong. But once she started with that, then he remembered it and he would do it all the time. So I really like those ideas, those strategies. And it's a good way to help your students remember how to write the letters. And they're going to need the guide less, right? They won't have to depend on it because they're kind of remembering that story in there. Okay, so some other strategies that can be used to write would be dictation, which we already mentioned, journals to have your students just write for communication. So with a journal, you're just it's just to have students write, and a journal can be used as a way for you to also communicate with the kids, right? So you would read it and you might make some notes in there or reply to anything that the student may have said, but it's just having students practice writing. So just, about anything that may be going on with them. And then you want to make sure that you're using that written language for routine. So like on the board, you'll see it in the elementary classrooms where they'll have the attendance with the students' names. And so the students will they'll move their marker to say that they're present in class, or, if they're, going to certain stations or something, but it's having that writing there visible for them to see. Teachers will have the weather charts, right? So they're kind of, saying, okay, well, today it's cloudy, so let's move the cloudy in here. So making those connections, having the date, always making sure you're including the date as well as that lesson objective. So I've even seen it in pre-K, right? In our Head Start program, they have the lesson objective written for the students. Obviously, right, 3 and 4-year-olds can't read, but the teachers have it there and they're pointing to it to, again, just help students make that connection with letters representing sounds. Again, you have to, go back to those TEKS on that link that we looked at and look at what students should know, so how students should be writing and what students will be writing in 4th to 6th grade. And It also mentions instructional materials or instructional strategies that you need to use to help students develop those handwriting skills. So like we just saw in the video, they kind of mentioned some strategies that you can use. But I just wanted to make a note that with those TEKS, if you look at what students should actually be writing, in 4th grade, they should be learning cursive. Okay, so I know that that was something that I know I heard some people mention how they don't teach cursive in school anymore. Well, in the 4th grade TEKS, students should be learning how to write in cursive and, you know, doing all their writing in cursive, you know, at some point. And in 5th grade, they should also be writing in cursive. So it actually is taught, something that you do have to do. Okay, so I'd like for you to go ahead and read through the descriptors again, make a note of any terms you need to learn or any descriptors that you still need to research, and then summarize any information that was clarified for you and be ready to share with your group. Okay, so I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that, and then I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms. Okay, so competency 8, I'm like, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get through everything because I'm running out of time. So competency 8 is the teacher understands that writing to communicate is a developmental process and provides instruction that promotes students' competence in written communication. So with this competency, we're looking at students writing to communicate, okay? And so there's gonna be a whole bunch of steps that are involved in writing. So we don't just go straight to writing, right? But we need to go back and we need to have those like pre-writing activities. So there's brainstorming that's involved, there's outlining, maybe there's some reading involved, right? Before you actually write something. You may have students do some research before they write. So there's a whole bunch of things that are gonna happen before they actually do the writing. And when students write, there's also gonna be different purposes, right? So I don't always write for the same purpose. And I'm also going to have different audiences that are involved. So students are going to need to know the knowledge of text structures, which we talked about a little bit a while ago. And they're going to need to know the strategies of how you know, you write for specific purposes, how you write for specific audiences, as well as the different genres of writing. So if I'm writing expository or persuasive, so there's a whole bunch of things that I'm going to have to teach my students about before they're actually able to do that type of writing. And with the writing, they're also going to need to know how to draft. Right? So they'll write like a rough draft, they'll edit it, they'll revise it, they'll proofread it, and then they'll produce a final draft. So, you know, just letting students know that writing is a continual process of fixing, right? And so we're not just going to write that one thing and that's it, we're done. We write it, you know, and we work on it and we improve it until we, you know, we finally get that final product. So something that can be done, and you may have seen this, is writing workshops. And so with a writing workshop, it should be done daily. And so it's used to help students practice a specific skill or strategy that you want them to do. So the rough drafts can focus on the content, and then the final draft is going to focus on proofreading. So in other words, when the students first write, we're just trying to make sure that they're, you know, writing for the correct purpose, for the correct audience and all that. And it's okay if things are misspelled or, you know, they don't have correct punctuation. But then when we get to the, you know, make sure that that content, then we'll go to the making sure that our final draft has that proofreading done, right? So we've looked for grammar, spelling, punctuation, all that. So in order to, you know, be successful in this, students are going to have to know those proper mechanics and grammar, right? Which is going to have to be taught as well. And they're also going to need to know how to revise their writing and making sure that they're, you know, that it's for the correct purpose, correct audience, you know, all of that, correct structure, depending on the type of writing that they're doing. So these are the components of a writing workshop. And then we're going to see a quick little clip on what that looks like the end product of it. But you would have a mini lesson. So you're going to teach a specific strategy or technique, and that would only take 10 to 15 minutes. So that's whole group. You have the whole class, and the teacher's going to teach something specific. Then you send the, you know, students back to their desks, and then the students are going to try it. And as they're trying it, the teacher is walking around and kind of having little mini conferences with the kids. And you're not telling them like, oh, that's wrong, right? But you're really trying to help them find the words or find find a way to say what they're trying to say, right? Get out their information. So it's kind of more of a process of you asking them questions to guide them to what they really want to put down on the paper. And then after that time to practice is done, then you bring back the students' whole group and you share what they wrote. Like you share how they were able to practice that strategy. So that can be done whole group with the whole class, or maybe you're going to have them, work in small groups and share, or maybe you're going to have them get together with a partner and share. Okay, so this just kind of shows what that looks like.
We want students to have joy as authors and find their voices and share their voices.
It's about a little boy named Sam. He finds Santa Claus in his front yard and he goes on a wonderful journey.
In your head right now, I want you to think, what am I going to write about today? And what will I use to write with today?
Writer's Workshop really centers around choice. And I think to me, that's one of the most important pieces because the kids feel like they really are the authors in the classroom.
Your idea was bang on. It was perfect.
I believe that every child has a story to tell. This allows the opportunity for each child to bring their own lives into the classroom.
The writing workshop has a number of key components, perhaps the three most central components.
The mini lessons, we need to be responsive to the needs of the children in the class. We have the opportunity for children to write independently and to conference with children and to coach them to move forward as writers. And at the end, we have the opportunity for the children to share their writing.
What they're getting used to is this idea of formative assessment, that receiving feedback helps them grow their practice as authors, and they are always trying to tinker with what you're doing to better communicate your story to your audience.
The first line of this one. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. What kind of a hook has our author included in? Because our classrooms are obviously so diverse, when you do your mini lesson, it allows you to kind of go from that access point, making it accessible to the whole class. And then when you really go into the conferencing piece, it really allows you to focus in on that student and see where they see themselves at, where they want to go, and offer them more support there.
I always play with my friends. Sometimes I dance in the nightclub.
Are you ready to go add some more to your writing? Yeah. Good man. What I love about a conference is it's led by the student, not the teacher. Really, they're self-regulating their learning. They're saying, here's where I want to go. Here's the goal that I have. And hey, teacher, you can help me out a little bit because I'm wondering about a technique for this.
That's one of my writing goals.
Show us your goals.
We end with an author circle.
It just really allows for a chance to celebrate everybody's progress.
I think it's really powerful because it also allows students to see themselves, no matter where they are in their writing, that they are authors.
The writing workshop framework allows them to move along a continuum of writing and see themselves develop their identity as a writer.
This is a community of authors. I'm impressed.
All right, so I had heard of writing workshops, but I think I'd only heard of them like in high school. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool that they're doing it, in the lower grades as well. And again, it's just to, give your students that confidence and that ability to write on their own. So this is another strategy that you can use. It's called the 6+1 trait writing. And this was developed by the Northwest Regional Laboratory, and it emphasizes the following. So organization, ideas, voice, word choice, sentence fluency, conventions, and presentation. So you can, look into that one a little bit more, but that's another strategy that you can use. And then, so if you click on this link, it'll take you to that Reading Rockets where I told you can get a lot of really good information. And again, this is all research based. Okay, so it kind of talks about the 6 traits model a little bit more and what all of those things mean. And then it kind of gives you some more information in terms of writing and how to help your students. Okay, so I would bookmark this page. There's a lot of information in terms of strategies that you can use for your students to help them with the writing as well as that pre-writing process. So I just dropped that in there just because it's a lot of information and I didn't have enough time to get through it all. Okay, but make sure you do, bookmark this website for sure. Take a look at that and take a look at this in a little bit more in detail. Okay. Okay, so when it comes to the characteristics of writing, there are going to be basically these main 4 types of writing. So there's narrative, descriptive, expository, and persuasive. So this just kind of goes over what those actually look like. And they're all written a little bit differently. So you do have to like explicitly teach, like what they are. I'll tell you with my, like with my son in kindergarten, right? When the teachers read books to them, they'll actually kind of say like, hey, this is a book, this is informational text, like it's telling us about, these animals or something. Or this is a fable, this is a nursery rhyme, right? So they'll tell them like what type of writing it is or literature it is. So that way and then they'll also kind of talk about define like what that means and what type of things they're going to be looking for in the reading. So the same thing goes when our students are writing, we'll need to tell them like define like what type of writing it is and then what those characteristics are of that type of writing. So like, for example, in a persuasive essay, I may not necessarily have, stuff that's made up or fictional, right? It should mostly be, right, kind of sticking to those factual evidence. You also need to teach your students about audience, occasion, and purpose. So they have to be taught to consider the audience before they actually write. And so if, if you're giving them a writing prompt and in the prompt itself, it doesn't say specifically who they're writing for, then you as the teacher, you need to tell them who the audience is. So you need to always designate the audience. If not, right, students are going to be writing for like different audiences, and we need to make sure that we're kind of focusing what it is that they're writing for. Occasion may also require certain words or types of language to evoke certain feelings. So kind of letting students know as well, like what is that we're trying to do, for this, what is the purpose, and then, what kind of language should we be using to try to serve that purpose, right? And then what else? All right, so the teacher should also practice those specific strategies that are going to be used for those different types of writing. So all of this has to be, really explicitly taught, in the early grades. And then as they get older, it's just kind of reminding them like, hey, remember when we, write for this author and for this purpose, right? These are the things we should be doing. So sources is another thing, right? We kind of mentioned that in Competency 6. But they have to know how to acknowledge the sources that are used for research and use appropriate conventions, such as when are you going to use quotes, right? If you're just paraphrasing, how are you just going to, give the author some credit? So they need to understand the difference between paraphrasing and plagiarism. And again, in Competency 6, it specifically mentions primary and secondary sources. So students understanding what those mean. Okay, again, for the TExES, you'll need to be looking at the written communication. So what types of written communication are students going to have to be doing from grades 4 through 6? So that could be, if they're just writing, persuasive essays in a certain grade, maybe they have to write letters. Maybe they've got to write, I don't know, an informational article, right? So you'll have to kind of, again, go through this website here. Make sure you've got 4, 5, and 6 on there, and you're looking at all right. So what types of writing the students are actually going to be doing.
Ms. Hinojos, that's one thing I noticed, and that when kids transition from 3rd through 4th, they really miss writing about themselves because, like in 3rd, it's mostly narratives. So that's one thing I've heard a lot kids say, well, Miss, can I just write a story about myself? Like, they like talking about themselves. And in 4th, that's not part of the TExES, so it's funny to see that.
And that might be something where you could incorporate like a journal, so the students just have a journal and maybe they have some time, I don't know, once a week or something where they can just write in their journal, and that would be what, you know, they can write about themselves. But that's nice that you notice that, because if you notice that students like that, and that's going to encourage them to write more, well then great, let's try to, you know, fit that in there. Maybe if it's not necessarily in my TEKS, right? That would be a way to just kind of practice that writing. So again, with the writing, you need to make sure that it is meaningful. So that ties in perfectly with what Diana said, right? So when they get to 4th grade, they're writing for different purposes. And so they're missing that, you know, writing about themselves, right? Kids love to talk about themselves. And so if you can give them the opportunity to do that and make it meaningful, then they're going to want to do it more. So some other ways that you can make writing meaningful would just be real simple things, just like labeling items in the classroom, right? I've seen that in the lower grades, like in kindergarten. They just have, you know, like the light switch or like the pass or the, you know, the whiteboard, computer, right? They just kind of have random things labeled. And by doing that, it's also going to help your ELLs, you know, to pick up on the language. You can have students make a list, right? So, okay, you know, Christmas is coming around the corner. I want you to go ahead and make a list of the Christmas presents that you want, right? Or Christmas presents that you wish you could buy your family, you know? And then again, right, just a journal. A journal will just be a way to do that. So I know as the kids get older, like in the, you know, in high school or something, you know, having a journal isn't going to be considered like critical writing or anything, right? But in the lower grades, we really want to encourage them to write. Okay, so for this one, same thing. We'll go ahead and just kind of summarize the information. And I'm not going to put you in groups because I'm running out of time. So I want to try to see if I can get through the rest of this. So again, make sure you're going through those descriptors. So I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. Got about a minute left. All right. Did any of you have any other strategies that you've maybe seen in your classroom when it comes to this competency?
I have seen one that I like when I was doing the learning pods a few weeks ago, and it was for first grade, and the teacher had like these big posters, and while the kids were eating their breakfast in the classroom, she would show the poster, and it would say like Thinking Tuesday or Funny Wednesday or something like that, right? And then it would have a picture, and then the kids would look at it, and then they would write something funny about the picture they were looking at. Or it was like one of the days it was like idioms, and it was like what I see, what I think, and what I see, what I know, and what I think it is, something like that. So the kids would look at it and then start writing after their breakfast, just like 10-15 minutes the tops, but every day they would write something different that would help them for different purposes and stuff like that.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. So it's teaching them to write for a purpose. Cool. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So another little quiz. Let's see how you do on this one. Ahead and I shared the responses. So everybody was able to get the first one right. But the second one, if you read the question, it is looking for a visual to categorize, right? So we're trying to categorize. We're not counting. So a line graph and a bar graph would look more at, it would be used to count like amounts of things, but a concept map would be a way to categorize information. A flowchart would be able to show us like an order of things, you know, either sequentially or like maybe even like cause and effect to an extent. But the concept map would be the best one for that second choice. Okay, so for the recording, my apologies, but I skipped competency 9. So there is going to be a video that goes over the media, which it was a real quick section on the Nearpod, but there's a video that I am including here in the Nearpod, which will help you just kind of go over the what media is and its purpose and all that. Okay, so last competency, which is competency 10. So this is looking at assessments. And so the teacher needs to understand the basic principles of literacy assessments, as well as use a variety of them. So I can't just be relying on the state assessment, right, or the STAR exam. I can't just be relying on my, you know, quizzes or tests at the end of a unit or at the end of a week, but I need to be constantly assessing my students as we are, you know, looking at ELAR, so reading and writing and all of that. So just to give an overview again, all of you should already know this, but assessments can be either formal or informal. And so when we talk about a formal assessment, that just means that it's graded, it's a high stakes, you know, type of deal. And it's typically done at the end of a unit or at the end of a learning segment. It could be at the end of the year, right? A benchmark, maybe at the end of like a semester. And then informal assessments would be something that's low stakes and can be done throughout the learning process. Remember, with your informal assessments, there's no grade attached to them, and it's more just to help you monitor the students' learning as well as your instruction, right? How do I need to adjust my instruction to help my students better? So when it comes to literacy, to, you know, reading and writing, we have to constantly be assessing our students informally. And then, of course, we are going to include those formal assessments at given points in time. So when it comes to reading levels, you do have to know the different reading levels. So there is the independent reading level, which means that students are reading 95% of words correctly when they're given a section. So I can't remember what it said, but you should be giving them like a certain length of text to read. And then the students have to, you know, they just basically read it. And you would have something, maybe you would have like the exact same piece of text, And as students are reading, when they get a word wrong, you would just kind of make a mark through it. And that would just kind of be your way of assessing them. So they're not necessarily getting a grade for it, but it's helping you to monitor where they're at in terms of their reading level. So an independent reader reads 95% correctly. An instructional reader reads 90 to 94% of words correctly, but they need help with from the teacher, right? So if the teacher's there to help them, then they'll be able to do well. But then you're going to have students that are at that frustration level, meaning that they're reading fewer than 89% of words correctly. And obviously it all has to do with the age of the student, the grade level of the student, as to the types of words and, you know, the like length of the passage that you're having them read and all that, as to where you would determine these levels. Okay, but make sure you do understand the difference between those. So when you want to check for reading proficiency, this is another form of assessment that you can do. The first thing would be story retelling, and this can be done in pre-K, right? So you read the students a story and then you ask them, so tell me what happened in the story, right? And so if students are able to explain to you what happened in the story, then that means they understood. The students can't write, right? Maybe they can draw a picture. You can have them draw a picture. That would be their form of writing, so that they could explain to you something that they understood. With a story retelling, that can be done all the way up into the higher grades, right? So maybe students are not quite at the level of writing ability to really explain everything to you, but if they can verbally tell you, that's a way to assess comprehension. You can have a structured informal assessment. So this would be where teachers create a checklist of criteria to look for while they're observing the students. So it's not going to be like specific to like the whole thing in general, but it's maybe looking for like specific things. Like, again, I'm gonna jump to math here just because that's what I would think of. So I'd be like, okay, is my student, are they underlining the terms that they needed? Are they, converting the word numbers into like, actual numerical numbers? Are they using the correct symbol, for addition or subtraction? Are they doing the correct like process? Are they actually adding? Are they actually subtracting? So it'd just kind of be looking for each of those things. So when it comes to English, right, or reading and writing literacy, you would be looking for certain criteria that students should be doing. So like, for example, in the writing process, right, are they brainstorming? Are they using their graphic organizer? Are they doing an outline? Are they doing all of those processes in order to finally get to that final piece? A portfolio assessment could be used to also look at a student's progression of writing over time. So that would be where you keep, maybe it's a folder or maybe it's a binder or something. And so as the students are writing, you're putting it in there. So when you look at their writing from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year to the end of the year, you can see that gradual improvement and progression of the students, maybe just writing skills in general or comprehension. But it would just, again, it's maybe not necessarily something that you would grade, and you're not going to keep every single piece of writing, but you would pick those key pieces of writing that would go in there. Another one is running records. And so with running records, it's ongoing assessments, and it's used to just measure progress for early readers. So they kind of, when it comes to assessing the kids in the really low grades, you really have to do that one-on-one. So the teacher, to give like a 9 weeks assessment in like first grade or something, the teacher's probably going to take all day to do it, because they're going to have to sit with each individual student, and talk to them to make sure that they are, understanding, or that they're actually assessing them appropriately. Another assessment that can be done are screening assessments. A whole bunch of different screening assessments that are given to students. There's like a dyslexia screening that's done like early on. I want to say kindergarten or first grade. They do like a dyslexia assessment to see if students might be dyslexic. At the beginning of the school year, they may have all of the students take an assessment just to see where they're at, if they're maybe showing tendencies that may prove to later lead to them being struggling readers, right? Because if they're struggling readers, they're going to be struggling writers. So that, they're always interconnected. And with a screening assessment, a lot of times it's going to be real quick to administer. So A lot of the screening assessments are done digitally, so they'll just have the kids go on some program and they'll have them do those.
That's what I was gonna ask. It'd be like iStation and Renaissance and stuff like that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So those would be some of them. But then, like I mentioned, with the dyslexia screening, the state of Texas actually they create that one, and they have the campuses administer that to all the kids. So, and that one's also I believe it's a digital one as well. And so with screening assessments, they don't diagnose anything, but they may, if someone doesn't pass like a screener, right, it kind of picks out the kids that, if they don't have these skills, then these kids, maybe I'm going to need to do intervention with them, or maybe I'm going to need to have the student evaluated for dyslexia, right? Maybe I'm going to need to have the student evaluated for special education. So it's just a way to kind of figure out what to do with the students next, okay? But it doesn't diagnose anything. So like if students don't pass the dyslexia screener, then they would be sent to, they would be given like interventions, and then maybe they're gonna have to take, then they'll actually have to be assessed to see if they are dyslexic. So it's not saying they are, it's saying that they might have some of those things that may be indicators of it. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so then there's different types of diagnostic assessments, and diagnostic assessments can also be used as screeners, but with a diagnostic, it's used to assess specific skills or components of reading. And this would be also like iStation, right? So I know a lot of the districts use iStation, and this would be used to inform instruction as well as intervention. So with iStation, it works with the kids and it kind of tracks their progress. And I know that when, if a student is not doing well with something, then it's going to have them do it again, right? It's going to have them continue practicing those skills. And so it kind of moves with the kids. So levels them up or it levels them down depending on where they're at. So when it comes to diagnostics, there are norm referenced diagnostics, which mean that they're formal and they compare student scores to a defined population. Maybe they're comparing the student scores to all the kids in the campus. Maybe they're comparing the kids to all the kids in that classroom, or comparing the kids to all the kids in the state. So that would be a norm referenced. A criterion referenced would, it can be formal or informal, and it compares the student skills to a defined set of skills that are needed for mastery. So it's not really comparing them to like other kids, but it's comparing them to things that they should be able to do. So like, for example, I don't know if I'm thinking about like, right, the students should be able to make the connections with the letters to the sound. They should be able to like blend the sounds, right? And they should be able to blend them to actually like make sense, right? So those are kind of that criteria that students should be able to do in order to read. But it's not something that I'm comparing them to like other kids. And this can be done before. So maybe I'm gonna give them this diagnostic assessment at the beginning of the school year, and then maybe I'm going to do it after I give them the instruction. So after we've done all of this phonics instruction, maybe at the end of the semester, right? I'm going to check them again and see if they now have those skills. Now they're meeting that criteria. Okay, now formal assessments, right? These ones, like we said, they're going to be graded, so they're high stakes. And they can include teacher-made tests, state assessments, or district exams. I mean, anything basically that's giving you a grade is going to be considered a formal assessment. And we have to use a variety of them to monitor learning. So when it comes to designing a good quality assessment, it takes time. So like I think back to when I first started teaching and I was not a very good assessment maker. And I would just like, okay, let's open up the test builder, click, click, click. All right, these are aligned, then I think they're good. But when it comes to really designing a good quality assessment, it's going to take more time. Like I really have to look at my standards. I really have to look at what skills my students need to be showing. And then I have to figure out what types of questions are going to be looking for skills. So if you are not, if you don't feel comfortable, being able to do that, then, definitely talk with your team on the campus or the instructional coach or someone that has more knowledge to help you do that. Okay, so I know it's 12 o'clock. I am almost done. So if you need to leave, feel free, but I'm just going to keep going until I finish, if that's okay. All right. Okay, so again, with the formal assessments, it's going to be used to measure overall progress, as well as acquiring those skills that students are going to need. So when it comes to formal assessments, I got to understand that it's helping me to assess where the students are at, so that, and again, when I think too, the way I originally thought when I first started teaching, I was thinking, man, if my kids fail my test, it's because they didn't study or they didn't know the information. But what I should have really been doing is self-reflecting and saying, what did I do that didn't help my students understand, right? Or what can I do to help them better understand? And so when we're looking at assessments, we're trying to find those areas that we need to improve instructionally so that we can address those areas of need. And it's also going to help to give us information on those students that are going to need like additional remediation, you know, that like tier 2 or that tier 3 instruction, where we're going to have to pull them aside and try something different for them, right? Because whatever I did that first time didn't work. So now I got to try something different. And so when it comes to assessments that are formal, their construction or how you create them is going to be super important, as well as the way you administer them, right? So some assessments I can give to the whole class as a group, but like I said, for those lower grades, a lot of those assessments have to be done individually and one-on-one. And they're not going to be able to all be written, and they're not going to be able to be like all on a computer, right? A lot of that's going to be kind of like that dialogue between you and the student. Okay, so this is an example of an assessment.
Lucas, we're just going to have a chance to read today the bicycle book. Before we do, though, can you please tell me what your reading goal is?
Fluency.
Fluency. So when you're reading, you're thinking about your fluency. What does that mean if you're becoming a fluent reader?
I can read accurately.
Okay, so you can read all of the words.
And with expression.
Oh, you'll change your voice. Wonderful. And what's another thing you really have to think about?
Understand what I read.
The comprehension. Perfect. Perfect. Wonderful, Lucas. Okay, before we begin, though, this is this part of the book we're going to read. It's a nonfiction book, so we're just going to go right to the middle. We don't have to read the beginning, middle, and end. I'll have you read pages 16 to 18 for me today.
On the road. Before taking off, always look around to see that the road is clear. Keep your eyes and ears open. You should not listen to your headlights while riding. You need to be able to hear the traffic. This will help you become a safe cyclist.
Wonderful reading. Lucas? I can tell you're thinking about fluency because that was smooth reading and it did sound like talking. And one thing you become a lot better at is paying attention to your punctuation. Now, the only thing I want you to go back to and look at is right here you read, keep your eyes and ears open. You should not listen to your head. Now, can I listen to headlights? Does that make sense?
No, not really.
No, not really. So let's just have a closer look. You're right about the first part. And
headset.
Headset. So that's just a little correction that you can make. And you did do a backup and reread here to correct. You read the word's actually you. Your didn't sound right. And you did a backup and you corrected that beautifully.
Okay, so notice how in the assessment she told the student what he did right, and then also like what he needed to improve on. So when we and in that assessment, you notice how she was taking notes, right, on what he was doing correctly and what he needed to go back and improve on. And then at the start of the assessment, you know, she also gave him that purpose for reading. So there's you know, he was an older kid, you know, but they were still having to do that one-on-one work with them, because with the kids, we're not only assessing like their knowledge, but we're also assessing their fluency and comprehension for reading, right? So it's more than just like what's on the paper physically. All right, so here's one more.
I want to know what letters you know today, okay? Pretty easy, right? Yeah. If you come to a letter you don't know, just say, I don't know, because that'll be okay. I just want to know what you already know. All right? Okay, we'll start with the first row.
B, G, H, A.
Good job. And the next row.
C, L, O, P.
You're quick.
T, D, M, R.
Good job.
E, F, J, I.
Good job.
S, U, W, V.
Excellent. And one last row.
Z, X, Y, K, N, and Q.
Wonderful job. You know those letters really well. Okay, you want to do the lowercase?
G, H, and A.
Good job. You go so fast, I need to slow down. Hold on. Go ahead.
C, L, O, P.
Excellent job.
T, D, M, R. E, F, J, I. S, U, W, V. Z, X, Y, K.
High five. Good job. Those were too easy. We've got to get just to do something a little harder. Are you ready? Okay, now each letter has a sound, right? Okay. I want to know what sounds you know. Okay?
I know all of them.
Oh, well, this is going to be so easy. I want to know which ones you do. Now, before we start, sometimes letters make two sounds.
I know.
Okay. If you know the sounds that letter makes, if it has two sounds, I want you to tell me those two sounds as well. Are you ready? Okay, when you're ready, you can start.
Ba.
Good job.
Huh.
What was G? What sound did G make? I didn't hear you.
J.
Okay. Do you know the other sound G makes?
No.
It says G.
Oh, yeah.
Good job. Okay. What about this one?
Sk.
Good.
Ah.
Good job. Now, O says ah, and it has another sound. Do you know the other sound it makes?
No.
Okay. O says its name. It says O too, sometimes in words.
If it E's next to it.
You're right. The rule, two vowels go walking, first one does the talking. Do you know that rule? Yeah. Okay, let's try the next row.
T.
Ba.
T. T.
Good job.
Okay. So there's more, it kind of finishes the assessment, but I'll go ahead and I just wanted to give you an example of what that looks like. Okay, now when we think of our English language learners, there is a TELPAS assessment, which is given to all of our English language learners from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And it stands for the TExES English Language Proficiency Assessment System. And it's basically just used to measure students' English reading, writing, and speaking. And this goes for any English language learner. They're going to have to take this assessment, and they will take it every year until they are advanced high, meaning that they have I guess, officially mastered the language in reading, writing, and speaking. So there may be some students that only have to do like one part of the assessment. Maybe their speaking is already proficient. So maybe they're only going to have to do the reading and the writing. So they can test, basically once they reach the highest area of scoring, I guess you could say, is when they'll be able to test they've tested out of TELPAS and they won't have to take it anymore. So in the high school, I've seen seniors taking TELPAS and they've been taking it since they were in elementary school, meaning that they still have not mastered that English language. And so again, once a student, it doesn't matter what grade they enter into the school system, but kids from kindergarten through 12th graders, if they're coded as ELLs, then they're going to have to take this assessment. And then when we look at so we've talked about TEKS, right? So your TEKS are those knowledge and skills that you have to be teaching in your classroom. But then the ALPS are the English language proficiency standards, and they have to be incorporated into your daily lessons. And so it's basically looking at practicing those speaking, writing, and reading skills in the classroom. So for example, I taught science, right? But in my science class, I should still have my students practicing speaking the language, right? So they should still be, like talking to each other, maybe in small group or talking in, to me. I should have my students writing. So maybe at the end of the class period, right, I'm going to have a closing and an exit ticket, and I'm going to have my students practice that writing of the English language in my science class. And then I'm going to also have to have my students practicing that reading. So, maybe if it's just reading a small piece of text from my class, maybe we're reading a question on the board, but I need to make sure that I'm incorporating those ALPs. And so your students, you'll also have to consider where your students are at in terms of their TALPAS testing. So their TALPAS testing is going to give them a rating, and it's going to tell you where their reading, writing, and speaking levels are at. So again, you may have a student they've got a high level for speaking, but they've got a really low level for writing. So for that student, I need to make sure that I'm incorporating strategies that are going to help them write better. So in other words, in my science class, right, I would be providing them like sentence stems, or maybe I'm going to provide them sentence starters. So it's going to help them to learn how to write better in my class. So in the English class, right, or in your, reading and writing class, I need to make sure that I'm also incorporating those tools to help my students do better. So I think, when it comes to writing and to speaking, thinking stems and sentence stems are a great way to help your students work on the language. So even if they're speaking, I can provide them a sentence stem so they can start their sentence, and then it's just kind of like a fill in the blank to finish it off. So then I did drop this link in here for the ALPS. So if you want to go ahead and open up that link, and then what's it called? Save it, download it, pin it somewhere just so you can kind of read through it. And when you click on the link and you scroll down, whenever mine opens. So it gives you the ALPS here. So it tells you what they are. And then if you scroll down, so those are all ALPS here. It also mentions these TALPAS levels where the students might be. So a student that is in the beginning for listening, it tells you that this is what they struggle with. So these may be things that I am going to need to provide supports to help them with. And so it does it for all of them. So listening, speaking, reading, and there should be a writing here. Yeah. Okay, so it tells you, so if you know your students' TALPAS proficiency level, then you can also incorporate strategies to help them improve with those other levels. Okay, so we are just about done. So just make sure you make a note of any terms, again, that you need to learn or descriptors. So make sure you're going back to those standards. Where is it? To the competency for assessment. So I will tell you the competency for assessment, the descriptors, it's huge. There's like a ton of stuff in here. So go ahead and read through those and see if there's anything else that you may need to read through. Some of the things that it does mention is knowing the content and performance standards for the TEKS. It talks about also knowing, I think for the STAR, what it is that students are being required to do on their STAR exams. So in 4th grade is going to be when students are going to be administered that first writing assessment for STAR. Okay, and I'm going to put you in one last breakout room to share anything that you wrote down, maybe about the different types of assessments, differentiating. Maybe if you've seen any other types of assessments that are being done in the classroom, if you can share those with the group as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that. Okay, was there anything that you all shared? Any other types of assessments that you've seen in the classroom? If anyone's talking, you're on mute.
We were discussing the one of our, I think what we were talking about was the creating your own assessments. And so I've shared that I've really never had created, and I know that you had showed us the tool where you can go in and it, I'm a little bit more familiar with like the Battelle, the IPT that we use, more research-based. You know, the STAR, I know about the STAR because my my children are going through school, but that's one of the things that I still feel a little bit that I need to straighten.
Okay, thank you. All right, so one last thing I did want to mention, if you'll notice at the bottom of every competency from 6 through 10, it mentions fostering collaboration with families. So, so this one is talking about communicating information about students' progress and their development. And it talks about doing that through a variety of means. So it's not enough that students are receiving like a report card or a progress report, but I need to make sure that I am sharing maybe with like Class Dojo, or maybe I have them like logged onto Teams and I'm sharing information with them. So there's got to be different ways that you're communicating with parents about the student's progress. You know, having you know, individual parent conferences with the kids, but just letting them know how they're doing, as well as like what they can do to help them. The one before that talks about understanding how to foster collaboration to promote students' development of media literacy, right? So how am I gonna do that, and how am I gonna incorporate my families and working with my students to do that? So maybe, you know, where the students are gonna be going home and you know, bringing, like asking their parents, like, I need an example of, you know, like this type of media, or I need an example of this so I can bring it to class and share it, so that your parents are a part of that. Then this one is looking at collaborating with families and other professionals to develop their writing skills, right? So sometimes you may have like contests where the kids are going to go home and do this at home with their parents, right? Or maybe you're going to have your parents be the ones that are going to give them some feedback on their writing, you know, incorporating them to do that. And let's see, and then I think that was our last one. Oh yeah, no, there was one more. So then this one here, looking to promote their ability to develop effective inquiry and research skills in the content areas. Okay, so all of these are also looking at incorporating the family. Okay, so one more little quiz just to see if you've got that, and I'm going to skip that one. So that video will go over some more assessments that can be done in the classroom, but this one is just going to be one more quiz just to kind of test your knowledge to see where you're at. All right, so sorry, I didn't change the time on that one, so it was pretty quick. I apologize for that. Okay, so I hope you guys got a lot out of today's review session. I will be sending out the link, and then I will also be sending out the self-paced Nearpod code so that you can access all of the videos. So again, I did include a couple more videos that we didn't go over today, but just as additional information.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it on a Saturday.
Yes, thank
We
you.
don't have class, so we're